Ask and thy shall receive. You guys have been hitting me up for a while. I myself have been curious about AirBNB. How legit is it? Can you make money in it? Are there legality issues there? Is it here today and will be gone tomorrow? Well, we have one of the country's best, Eric MOELLER, on the podcast. Aaron, right now, who's going to talk about the ins and the outs of how you can make big money with Airbnb. Yeah, kid. Welcome everybody back to another episode of Smells Like Cat Pee with your man, Handsome. I'm here. Got an awesome guest today. Ask and thy shall receive. You guys have been hitting me up in the DMs, in the text platform, in the comments. And you're like, Handsome, I understand you love Section 8 rentals. I understand you love commercial property. I understand you love fixing, flipping, dormers, everything. But you know what I don't understand? Airbnb. And I'm like, you know what? I looked at Mark, my handsome CFO, and I said, Mark, I don't understand Airbnb either. So I went out there, searched high, low. I'm like, listen, I got to find someone who's out there, who's accessible, who's cool, who knows their shit, and we gotta find out. So I found this gentleman on social media, which is it's awesome. You can find anything on Instagram. It used to be back in the day, you could find anything on Craigslist. You can get drugs, a date, arrested, a car, you name it. Now you go on IG, bam, anything. So I got my man, Eric MOELLER, like the tooth. This gentleman has a company called Overnight Success, where basically what they do is they teach you how to start and scale any type of Airbnb operation, whether you want to go mild 1 unit, wild 100 units, which is what he actually owned. He had over 100 plus doors. He's out in San Diego on the West Coast. For some reason, I've been talking to a lot of people on the West Coast, and they are fire. They're on the West Coast. They're enjoying that life, but they're doing business all over the country. He's got a podcast as well, which is called Get Paid for Your Pad. Love the name. If you guys are interested in learning more about Airbnb, you can go to his website at overnightsuccess.io, which he'll talk about, or check out the podcast. Like I said, Get Paid for Your Pad. But without further ado, bam!
My man.
Have you ever gotten an intro that went anything like that?
I gotta say that is by far one of the best intros I've ever got, and also makes me miss the East Coast, man. Makes me miss the East Coast. I love the energy.
Were you an East Coaster at one time?
Yeah. I grew up in New Jersey, so.
No shit. All right.
Yeah, from Newark area.
So what made you go to California besides the insanely sexy women, amazing weather, and great Mexican food?
All of that. Yeah, man. So my background is in real estate development. So Back on the East Coast, I was doing everything from house flipping to apartment buildings to brand new construction, that whole thing.
Oh, shit.
And then long story short, I had a really bad partnership, cashed out of that, started kind of traveling around the country, staying in different Airbnbs. This is before Airbnb was what it is today. Came out to San Diego, went to a business event here, fell in love with San Diego, and just decided to stay. And I've been here ever since. So it's going on about 6 years now.
So just so people understand, I mean, there's certain people, mostly everybody understands what Airbnb is, but just give people kind of like, the 90-second rundown of essentially what Airbnb is or Airbnb is. And there's other competing companies now also, which you can mention.
Yeah. So Airbnb is just a platform. It's a booking platform, right? So it's a marketplace to rent out your property or somebody else's property for short period stays, right? So Airbnb has really the business that we're talking about is called short-term rentals. It's anything that if you rent a piece of real estate for 29 days or less, that's technically a short-term rental. All right. So it could be 1 day, it could be 29 days. Airbnb kind of made short-term rentals sexy again, right? So they created the platform, they created a culture, and they created an ability to rent out essentially any property in any place around the world. As long as you have, some type of demand for travel there, you can rent out a property. So, Airbnb is a platform to market and host properties.
What's going on, guys? So sorry to interrupt this podcast. If you haven't already, you need to join my text platform, 516-871-3511. I'm sharing all my tips and tricks. People are doing deals in there. It's a great free resource. Don't miss it. 516-871-3511. Now back to the podcast. So talk to me, and again, I'm into real estate big time, but I'm very ignorant to the Airbnb model. There's things that I hear that I'm sure you've heard a million times, which I'm sure everybody has, which is, what are the legalities of this, right? I hear some people say, people hit me up and they're like, I want to do an Airbnb. And what I always say to them is, hey, if it works as a regular market or Section 8 rental and you want to Airbnb it and make more money, that's cool. But have that as a fallback plan, because from what I've heard, and it might be wrong, that Airbnb, like there are certain laws that Airbnb doesn't meet in certain areas, or I don't know the specifics, if you can enlighten me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so, again, short-term rentals is really what we're focused on. Airbnb is just one of the platforms. So we have VRBO, we have booking.com, we have Expedia, Google, all that stuff. But if you want to simplify it to Airbnb, looking at that as a business model, it's here in the States, we do business all around the world. That's another reason why I love Airbnb. When I was doing real estate development, I was, as you know, locked down to one centralized area, right? Yeah. Everything was there, my properties, it was very difficult to expand outside the area. With Airbnb, I'm able to kind of run properties pretty much anywhere in the world, which is pretty incredible. With that said, here in the States, short-term rentals are regulated on a state level, city level, and community level, right? So everyone has their own different rules and laws, and everyone's trying to figure out if they want short-term rentals in their community or not. So what I would recommend is, before anybody dives, especially investors, before they dive into converting their properties to Airbnbs, is to contact zoning and find out if there's any zoning regulations or any laws in place for short-term rentals. So, but also what you said, like, we never buy properties 100% based on Airbnb numbers. We buy it as a long-term rental. And if we can add short-term rentals to it, then we're 2 to 3xing our revenue on the properties, right? So it's a bonus to the model. Okay,
so that's basically what you do. You go in and say, okay, this would be, a good market rate rental at $1,500 a month, but if I Airbnb this thing, I can make $3,200 a month, and then you just roll with that. So as a worst case scenario, you always have the regular 1-year lease plan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're always defaulting to long-term, right? Because, we just went through a pandemic, right? So the world stopped traveling for quite some time. So Airbnb income went out the window, right? So you have to always look at, I tell people always to value your property, make sure it cash flows as a long-term rental. Mm-hmm. But if you can have it legally as a short-term rental, then it's an extra bonus on that property.
So that's a really good segue. So how did COVID impact you? Because I guess it all depends on, with real estate, it depends on where you are, right? So we're in Long Island, it because you're from Jersey, suburb of New York. If you had an Airbnb, short-term, long-term rental, any rental of any kind on Long Island, I mean, people were all over it. Everybody wanted out of the city. Yeah. So they did exceptionally well. The numbers went through the roof. Are your Airbnbs, or your short-term rentals, I should say, are they mostly in tourist type areas, or are they everywhere? Like, how do you concentrate, and how are you impacted during COVID?
Yeah. So the industry changed so much over the last 12 months. It's, when I first got started in Airbnb, my model, I wasn't buying properties. Even though I was a real estate investor, what I was doing was I was partnering with landlords, leasing their properties, staging them, and then re-renting them back out on Airbnb, and making the difference between my expenses and what I brought in on Airbnb. So we scaled that model, and that model worked in urban areas. So we would go into an apartment building and rent up an entire apartment building. Right?
Wow.
The entire apartment building to Airbnb. We then turned that into a model where we were managing. So like, say you had a apartment building, you want to turn it into Airbnb. You were looking for a manager to manage the Airbnb process. We would step in, run that process, and then take 20 to 30% of revenue, right?
No kidding.
So those were the models that I first got into, and we scaled that super quick, right? Because if you can prove to an investor that you could either guaranteed rents for a year or two on their entire building, or you can show them how you can make more money on their building by turning into Airbnb, investors were lining up. So we focused on urban markets, downtown cities, San Diego. We were all throughout the West Coast. This was happening all around the world. COVID hit. What happened? People stopped going to the cities.
Everybody left the city.
There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. And during quarantine, what are you going to do? You're going to sit in a small apartment? Doesn't make sense. You want to get out. You want to go to the mountains. You want to go to the lakes. You want to spread out, right? So the urban markets crashed really hard, and they're still struggling right now.
Wow.
Especially like New York, LA, where they have the mandates there. People don't really want to travel to those areas right now. But people want to go outward, right? They want to go outward and inward. They want to go to what we call secondary markets. So mountain towns kind of spread out and breathe. So those markets expanded very, very quickly. So I got out of the management / master leasing model. We raised a ton of money during COVID and created a new brand. And we went into secondary markets and started acquiring land to develop tiny home communities for Airbnb. So that's our new push. And that's what I think the future of Airbnb is going to be, is creating experiences around properties for people to travel to.
So, I mean, there's so many things I want to ask you. So let's, as far as the tiny home communities go, have you built any of these things yet? Or you're just in the process of doing this now?
Yeah, so we just bought our first property 3 weeks ago in a small mountain town about 2 hours northeast of San Diego. Okay. So we have 4 cabins on there now, and we're designing another 10 to add to the property. So we're going to be adding an additional 10.
And what's the primary market drivers in that area? Is it recreation? Is it skiing? Is it vacation type stuff?
Hiking and getting out of the city. That's the biggest thing. Yeah, it's like, how do we leave San Diego? How do we leave LA? Those are my target markets.
So the first thing I think of when I hear you doing the tiny home community is coming from New York, and we have NIMBYism and zoning nightmares. Is, how scalable is this business? Like, when you live in New York, it's kind of like a bubble, and New York is like another planet, and you kind of feel like everything is like that, but it's not. When you leave New York, everything's very different. Or Jersey, same thing. Is this a scalable model? Can you get big pieces of land and rip out 10, 20, 30 small homes?
Yeah, now we're talking about a whole different sector within the Airbnb side, right? Because like what happened with COVID, they really developed like a new traveler. The new traveler wants to go, as I mentioned, go into more nature-based locations. They want to spread out, they want to breathe, they want to chill, and they want more of an experience, right? So we're targeting those types of markets. We're targeting those types of people. But I'm also, to answer your question, I'm also acquiring land that has the approval for us to add multiple dwellings.
Yeah, smart.
Now, that's phase 1 for us to grow for, the launch of the company. Phase 2 is start moving into different areas, buy lots of land. Right now, I'm buying about 5 acres. Okay. Roughly about 5 acres, 10 acres. The next phase is going to more land. How do we get 20, 30, 100 acres and create larger communities? That's going to be a battle for sure. That's going to be lots of education. That's going to be us being patient through the process, but it is scalable. Certain communities want it. Certain communities don't. We move into short-term rental friendly communities for this. So we'll see. We're trying to acquire 3 more properties right now around this.
It's interesting, and maybe you've thought of this before, but when you say that, I ultimately think, because I've had people actually trying to sell me these recently in upstate New York, summer camps that went out of business.
Yeah, that's what we're acquiring.
Are you?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So when I say that's what we're acquiring, is like that's part of our business, our expansion model is to acquire properties that already have the approvals to add multiple dwellings, and also transients. So, having people stay there that are not living there. They're there for a night, they're there for a week, and then they're leaving. There's certain zoning around that. But yeah, as you know, it's I just bought my first property here in California, and it was a freaking nightmare buying out here, but it is what it is. The next one we're trying to buy 2 more here in California, and then the next one we're trying to buy in Utah, near Park City. So
talk to me about the acquisition process. Like everything I do is in New York. Like I own over 100 rental properties, but they're all on Long Island, so they're like a stone's throw away. talk to me about, for people who want to learn, the acquisition process, building the team, putting all that together to be able to, you're in California, you're buying stuff in Utah, you're buying stuff in the Midwest. It's, it takes 4 hours to get there on a plane.
Yeah.
How are you getting the right deals, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, community is everything, right? So part of our educational company, which is called Overnight Success, we have 3 main focuses in Overnight Success. We have what's called Get Paid for Your Pad. That's where we teach people how to get started on Airbnb. Okay. Then we have what's called our Legends X Accelerator. That's where we help people scale their Airbnb business. And then we have the Legends Mastermind, which is a high-level mastermind for hospitality operators from around the world. So people that are doing 2, 3, 4, 500 Airbnbs, development, hotels, all that stuff. So this has been in the works for me for a couple of years, right? So the way I'm able to expand out is we got super clear what we want to buy, where we want to buy. We understand what guests we're targeting, what problems we want to solve for them. And then we have certain locations on where those guests are willing to drive from. So for example, we know that the guests that I'm targeting for my properties, they're willing to drive 2 to 4 hours from their area, from where they live, 2 to 4 hours, right? Then I'm focused on, what cities have the most people that would also fit my target market for my guests. We find those cities, we circle out 2 to 4 hour drive from those cities, and we start targeting secondary towns. But now the reason why I brought up the Legends Mastermind is we're able to now connect with investors, developers, operators, management companies from around the world to help us locate those properties and then manage those properties boots on the ground. The acquisition is not the challenge part. It's the operational side of Airbnb. That's the challenge, because you're running a hospitality business at the end of the day. It's not an investment business.
So that's what I was like. That was going to be the next thing I was going to ask you, which was, so I rent primarily to CDC Section 8 or some type of program-based tenant. I never want these people to leave. The average Section 8 tenant stays for like 11 and a half years. I'm like, stay there forever. You have as high, you are on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So when I think of what you're doing, I'm like, I watch your videos and I see that, use technology, which I'm not the most tech savvy guy, but use technology to really, manage a lot of the process. I'm like, how the hell is this guy doing it, man? Like in one day, out the next day, cleaning, making sure people think they're happy. Like, I just feel like you must have headaches galore. No?
I did in the beginning when I first got into the business, right? We created the 5 stages of Airbnb hosting, and it goes from the absolute beginner to the legend status, someone who's running multiple properties at a high level as a CEO position. But one of those 5 stages is called the hectic host, right? And that's where you start bringing on all these different Airbnb properties, and you're running it as a manager where you have no real systems, no real people, no real vision of your business. If you're operating, and I mean, you run a business yourself. If you're running it with no systems and no real vision, and you're reactive in your business, you're going to have headaches like crazy, right? Yep. And I've taken my time to figure out how to streamline the process through as much as possible through technology. Number 2 is how to hire the absolute best people possible who love hospitality, who love creating experiences for people, right? So is it hectic? It could be. We're in the hospitality industry. We have people turning over. We don't know the people checking in. They're expecting to check into a 5-star, experience. If our cleaner drops the ball at one point, it's going to affect everything down the line, right? So, I mean, we've gone through those stages where it was extremely difficult, but I was determined to build this business where I can own real estate and control real estate all around the world, anywhere I want to go. Be able to see what's happening with my business anywhere around the world just from my laptop, and then be able to have it as a cash flowing business. So, obviously it's like anything else. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's possible. I tell my students all the time, it's like, look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk is trying to put people on Mars. He's trying to colonize a whole other planet. He's got multiple companies driving towards that one vision, right? I could figure out how to run Airbnbs around the world with the right people and the right technology. It's possible, right?
Nah,
So
100%.
yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of the way that I approach my business and how we help our students approach their business.
No, it's smart. I mean, and I think people, like, a lot of people come to me all the time. They're like, Charles, I want to flip. I want to do real estate. I want to do Airbnb, whatever it is. And I think what the important thing is that you've demonstrated is you spend time, you got the right education, and you have a plan. It makes sense. You're not just buying Airbnbs at random or buying a property and say, I should Airbnb this. You are methodical in the sense that you're looking at major cities and you're saying, okay, people don't want to be in major cities. They're willing to drive 2 to 4 hours. Here's the demographic. They're interested in hiking, skiing, whatever it is. They're going to stay an average of, 1.8 days. They're anywhere from 30 years old to 45 years old. Like, you have it dialed in.
You need it. I mean, you need it. Every business needs it, right? And it's, the one main, we have something that we call the VOS system, vision, operations, scale. One thing that we see often is hosts, business owners, when they try to get into the Airbnb business, they just start taking on properties all over the place. And they just start saying yes to everything. They start managing properties, they start leasing properties, they start buying properties, but there's no real vision to what they're actually building, who they're serving, and why they're serving them, right? Again, it's completely different from the business that you're in and what I used to be in. We used to buy real estate was like about location, about the deal, and then how long can we have somebody in there that's going to take care of our property and pay us on time, right? And then if we can refinance it or sell it in the future and buy some more real estate, that's awesome. This, you have that aspect, but this is all about hospitality. It's about turning over these experiences nonstop. It's a 24/7 business, right? So you have your investment arm, but you also have your operational arm. So like one thing that we do from the beginning is we help people really get clear on the vision of their business. And this is something that we've done. We've invested about 8 months into the vision of our company that it took us about a year to buy our first property because we were patient about building the brand, who we're serving, why we're serving them, how are we serving them. Once we got that vision, then we focused on turning that vision into a machine through technology, systems, and hiring the right people, which we're going through right now on the property business. Once we do that, then we're going to focus on scale. I see too many people trying to get in here and just like, let me try to get as much as possible, as fast as possible. They hear individuals like yourself, I have 100 units. That's freaking awesome. I need to get that, right? Yep. But they try to do it too fast. And that's where the headaches and the challenges come from. So we take the approach of focus on vision, turn the vision into a machine. And then once we have the machine, then we scale the right way.
Patience, man. That's basically what it comes down to. It's like you get the education, you build out the model. Once you get a machine that works, you pour money, you pour more time, you pour more people into it, and eventually scales. But it makes sense to wait. I mean, I trained for 3 to 4 years before I ever did a first deal. When I was ready to get my first deal, exactly like you, it took me a year just to find my first deal. And I've done over 400 plus houses in the last 5 years. So it's like you can do more deals by just waiting and preparing than just coming right out the gate and trying to do it.
Yeah, man. I mean, you have to be clear on what you're actually getting involved. So like we're going deeper into, it has nothing to do with Airbnb. It goes into, as an entrepreneur, how you're making decisions, why you're making decisions, and being patient in that process. And I tell you what, like things just start falling into place. You asked me how the acquisition side's going. It took us a year to build a vision, tell people about what we're doing. As soon as we were ready for this new company that we're launching, the investors popped up and funded us 100% of our acquisition and seed for our company.
Wow.
The property popped up the same week. They accepted our offer, and a month later, we had our first property. But as soon as we were ready to take it on, that's when the opportunities started popping up.
No, it's true that makes sense, but you got to be prepared. You got to do due diligence. You got to set it up right. So I want to talk about the course and obviously what you offer people, and I kind of want to break it down into, let's say, beginner, intermediate, advanced. So like what are you teaching people? What should people expect? What are the first steps at both those levels? Just want to get into it, have a couple and want to scale, and then like you just want to nuke this thing and have 500 plus doors.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the first step is like if someone's trying to get into this, we do our best to try to teach people through our social media, through our podcast, Get Paid for Your Pad, and through our blog, which is called Get Paid for Your Pad. We try to teach enough people through all of that how to get started on their first listing on Airbnb. But essentially, the whole concept there is teaching them that, Airbnb is a hospitality business. So we're teaching them the process of how to get started on Airbnb, how to find some profiles, how to set up the systems, all of that, right? The very entry level side of the business, how to deal with your customer service, cleaning, all of that. So like now that you have one Airbnb listing, if you love it, if it's awesome and you want to get more, that's when we bring you into our 90-day program. Which is a business accelerator program. It's called Legends X. And in that process, we teach those three fundamentals: vision, operation, scale. Okay. So in the 90-day program, we're not going to teach you the basics behind Airbnb of how to send messages, how to automate messages, how to automate your cleaning, how to automate your check-in. All of that we're going to teach you on the entry-level stuff. The 90-day program is how to actually scale that to $1 million business, right? So if you have one unit, how do we get that to 25 or 30 units where you're making $1 million a year on Airbnb through systems and operations in your company?
So when, as far as like comparables go, right? If I'm looking at comparable rents, I'll go in MLS or like one of the local. How do these different sites, Airbnb, et cetera, do they have kind of like metrics that help you price your units? How do people go about doing that?
Yeah, good question. So that's called ADR. Okay, so what you're looking for is average daily rate. Okay, so that's how much you rent out your property on an average per night, right? So that's a really important number to understand on your listings, right? So we have to understand what competitors are doing with their ADR, and then what's possible with your current property ADR. So what we do is we look at what are the competition doing with their ADR, and then at our properties, we want to try to do 70% occupancy. So we can rent out our property 21 days out of the month on average. Then we're golden, right? So if our ADR, so we find the ADR, multiply that by 70%. And then if we can see that, obviously everyone has their own thresholds. If we hit our threshold with our income, we know that's a solid property. But the best tool, that's part of the stuff that we teach is like there's tools that you can plug into your Airbnb that will price your property the same way hotels price their properties and how airlines price their properties. It's dynamic based on demand, based on travel, trends, all of that stuff. So we kind of set it and forget it, and the tool kind of does all the pricing for us.
So what kind of other deductions? So obviously you're laying out a pro forma for, rental, you have maintenance, management, et cetera. You're obviously running more like a hotel in the sense that now you also have, you have furniture and things that you have to write off or replace after a certain period of time. What are the other deductions that you have, and at what percentages do you usually budget for these?
That's a good question. So if we're talking from the investor standpoint, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, like if you're yourself, you're purchasing a property, you're going to Airbnb it. You just said you're factoring in for a 30% vacancy. What are the other, like you have furniture in there. Do you allot a certain percentage of gross rent to the furniture that's going to go bad over time and you have to replace it? Do you have you put in a management fee? Do you put in a maintenance fee? What else do you put in there?
Yeah, good questions, man. So it all depends on the investment model, right? If you're buying existing properties, I don't know how much we're putting towards depreciation of furniture. On average, I would say furniture if you're at a 70% occupancy, I would say you're turning over or updating your furniture every 5 years, 3 to 5 years. So it's a high turnover, right? Depending on, and also you want to keep up with the designs of your properties. But yeah, so we typically mark in 20 to 30% for management. So that's the first one. 2 is we typically spend about 2 to 7% on technology for the properties. Technology is pricing, property management software, digital locks, all that stuff. We also have cleaners. Cleaners are the biggest expense on your property. So many different ways we can take that. You can have in-house cleaners, you can outsource cleaners, you can charge your guests, you can take in the fee. There's quite a bit that goes into the cleaning side.
Sure.
Along with that is your linens and cleaning. So there's quite a bit that goes into this stuff.
Yeah, man.
I would say the biggest thing is like carving out anywhere between 30 and 35% of total gross revenue towards expenses of your property. Yeah.
Interesting. So, and in your opinion, because obviously those expenses are pretty heavy duty. Like if you compare that, obviously my rents are going to be lower on a Section 8 type building or market rate building, but your expenses are going to be much higher. Do you feel that Airbnb from a general ROI standpoint pays much better than a market rate or Section 8 type rental, long-term rental?
Yeah. So it depends on the market, depends on the property. We wouldn't take a property on unless we can minimal 2x the market rate rent. So on average, our properties are 2 to 4x market rate rents on the property. So expenses are higher, labor is higher, but if you can 2 to 3x your market rate rent on the property, it's a home run, right? And then on top of that, the difference about this is your property is typically kept up a lot better than long-term rentals. That's what I found, at least, because you're in there every week, multiple times a week, cleaning the property, making maintenance, all that stuff. Also, it's a unique property. What am I looking for? It's a unique asset class, right? So it's a new type of asset class that's starting to grow. So you have a different type of multiple when you go to value or sell the property because of the amount of income that you have coming in on the house. So again, I mean, I wouldn't have left the game. I did Section 8 for quite some time. I've done it all in real estate. I went all in on Airbnb because I believe in the model. Gave me a lot more freedom of being able to kind of run properties remotely. And now cash flow is pretty incredible. And then also our wealth, our personal wealth is starting to grow at a faster rate because of the value of the properties that we're buying.
Yeah, so that was going to kind of be my last question, which is kind of like a two-part question, which is, A, how are institutions looking at these from a financing standpoint? Are there banks that are now kind of carving out that niche for the short-term rental type stuff? Because I know some banks are afraid of industrial, they're afraid of multifamily. Like every bank has their own niche. And then as far as like evaluating these things, is there a cap rate model? Is there a multiplier of net? Like how are they valuing these Airbnbs and how are you financing these things, or how can people finance them?
I think this is the biggest opportunity for finance companies and investors now and into the future is try to figure out the best way to value and the best way to lend on short-term rentals. There's only a handful of companies that I'm aware of that are actually lending on the purchase of short-term rentals and the refinance of short-term rentals. But with that said, more and more companies are noticing that this trend, it's not a trend, it's not going away. It's an actual asset class that's coming into the game. So more and more companies are lending on it. Before, it was like almost impossible to find insurance on short-term rentals, but now the insurance game has stepped up because of the opportunity there. Now I think the next step is the financing side. There's a really good company that I would recommend reaching out to anybody who's an investor that's looking to buy or refinance a short-term rental. It's called Host Financial. So hostfinancial.com. There were a bunch of Airbnb hosts that came together and created a lending company for that. So I can't really touch too much on how they're valuing it because it's freaking all over the place. And you can't just go into a bank and get a loan on it. They won't value it as a short-term rental, but more and more companies are starting to do that.
So are most of your short-term rentals single-family homes at this point?
No. So again, right before COVID, we got out of the management leasing side of short-term rentals, and they were apartment buildings, and luxury homes. Now what we're doing is we're acquiring land and then developing multiple properties on that land. Right now, we're doing that through 100% cash. So we're buying all of our properties and development through cash, private investors. But the goal is in 3 years, is to refinance everything based on the properties. So, but they'll all be individual units.
Would you say the average investor that like gets into Airbnb, would you say most of them are running single family homes?
Yeah. So what we're seeing is single family homes and then small apartment buildings. So converting entire buildings to Airbnb properties.
It sounds like the majority of your experience, like you have a lot of experience with the apartment buildings. If you have an apartment building that say would be selling for like a 5 cap in a certain market with longer term tenants, how is the cap rate affected by Airbnb? Or do they understand it? They don't? How does that work?
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to the institution that's lending. We are seeing a lot more appraisers taking Airbnb income into consideration and using that as a valuation for the property. So we're seeing that. But again, it's all over the place. We're seeing numbers all over the place. So I wish there was one straight definition behind how they value short-term rentals, but it's just the same way of how they legalize short-term rentals. Every city is kind of different right now. So, but if you think about it, if you can show that your business has been generating or your business can generate 2 to 3x market rate rents, here's the comps, here's how we're going to manage it, all of that. The right appraiser and the right institution will take that into consideration.
No, 100%. I mean, listen, one thing is for certain, short-term rentals are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. And just like it used to be very difficult to fund single-family homes from banks, but now banks are understanding that they only wanted apartment buildings. Now they realize single-family homes are huge revenue generators. So I guess it's just a matter of the market catching up. But in the interim, there's big opportunity with people like yourself, if they train with somebody like yourself and really understand the industry, to really take advantage of something that's still in its infancy, even though Airbnb has been around for a minute. I really appreciate you coming down, man. I mean, this is, awesome information. Again, I really encourage people to check out your platform, especially your social media. You drop a ton of gems on there and the quality of the content is excellent. How do people get a hold of you, find you, and check you out and reach out if they're interested in learning?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would say on social media, on any platform, it's Eric D. MOELLER. So TikTok and Instagram are like our 2 big channels right now. And then I would say anybody who's interested in Airbnb, just check out our podcast, Get Paid for Your Pad. We're on all the things, Apple and Spotify or wherever the hell they are.
We signed up for the website. It blasted out everywhere. Wherever you want to listen to it, it's there.
Yeah, right? Yeah, we're there. I would say that's the best bet. Check me out on social media, Eric D. MOELLER, and then on the podcast, Get Paid for Your Pad.
Beautiful, man. And obviously, I'm the Handsome Homebuyer. If you have a house that smells like cat pee, dated from the 1960s, 6 inches of mold on the wall, human waste floating past the basement steps, I'm quick. I'm easy. I'm a good time. I want to buy it. 51677 sold. That's a wrap.